Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather update brought to you by Farm Credit. This past couple of months here has really led to some highly anomalous weather throughout the spring and now as we approach early summer that is going to just continue to cause a lot of disruption in the global flow. And what I'm talking about here is kind of seen in this map of ocean temperatures. There's a lot of warm water in the North Pacific, a lot in the hurricane main development region right in through here, a lot of very warm water that is in the North Atlantic. And while we're only looking at ocean temperatures here, there's been a lot of anomalous warmth in the central part of North America, and the same thing for a large part of Russia. So the net effect here is that our equator to poleward temperature gradient is actually quite weak this spring as we head into early summer. The big contributing factor that's a major difference from previous years, especially the last three, is that we've got this very warm water that stretches from South America over toward Indonesia. And this is a part of our El Nino, which we've been talking a lot about. Now, I need you to keep this map in the back of your head as we kind of walk through where this forecast is going, specifically with what's happening in the Atlantic Ocean when compared to this El Nino event. Because right now, this El Nino event continues to become quite strong. And so we already have seen the ocean temperatures touch 1 degree C above average temporarily. They do bounce around and fluctuate a lot like this, but we do anticipate this to continue to get stronger. And if you saw this last week, I just want to make sure you all see it again. The latest update from our Climate Prediction Center out of NOAA suggests a better than 90% chance of maintaining El Nino through January, February, March of this upcoming winter. Now, normally when we think about this becomes our biggest concern. In July and August, we tend to just be drier. We tend to see a displaced Bermuda high. We tend to see reduction in hurricane risk. And as a result, the whole of our Gulf Coast and southeast up the East Coast, just historically, when you stitch all those years together, July and August, when there's a developing El Nino, this is what you get. But there are big question marks about this. So I want to let you know that even though this is what history would tell me, there's nothing right now that I can look back on history and say that this year looks exactly like. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing that allows me to draw a strong analog from the past to kind of explain the present and the future. So what we need to be doing here is thinking about other things. Since May 1st, so if we just look at the month of May, the atmosphere, as all that warm water and warm air pushed north, lost all of its momentum. And it built up into what I fear, which is called the Triple Ridge. There was a ridge here, there was a ridge there, and there was a ridge here. Now, this is the ridge you need to care about. That ridge normally lives here over Bermuda. And we've talked about this last couple of weeks, but it has been severely displaced and has moved over toward, Europe. It's moved over toward the UK. In fact, you probably heard over the weekend about the British band members who suffered the heat issues. Well, that's the ridge that should be there now, or shouldn't be there, compared to normal. If that ridge were sitting here, it'd be the pump to bring in the heat. It'd be the pump to bring in the moisture for the southeast. In fact, much of us in the Midwest would love this as well. It would bring the moisture out of the Gulf here. But instead, there's been a large high-pressure cell that's sat, it's moved from eastern Canada to western Canada and back. It's sometimes sat over Minnesota, Illinois. It's just been in the midsection of the country. And there's a complementary upstream ridge to this over the Aleutian Islands. Now, we look at all of this and realize that the jet stream has to go around these ridges, so you end up getting troughs on the west coast. Big ridge here, trough on the southeast, and the next big ridge is there. And what this has done is kept much of the plains extremely wet, and it's kept the Intermountain West right in through this corridor very, very stormy as well. We've just never broken away to really warm conditions over parts of the southeast because of this. Now, when you look at the beginning of this month, so June 1 through June 9th, we'll get new data, of course, coming about later in the day on Monday. This ridge has really, at the beginning of June, stretched its way out like this. And that is what prompted earlier in this month all of the wildfires to erupt again in Quebec, which we, of course, saw the tremendously bad air quality move down the East Coast. Well, this ridge, the one that's in bright red here, has slowly moved its way back into this direction over the weekend. We need to see what that's going to mean for this pattern going forward, and are we going to be able to shake this anomalous low pressure because we need to see this shift around a bit to just set up our typical summer thunderstorm regime, our typical summer temperature regime. Okay, so that's what the background thinking is in all of this. Now, I want to show you something about what happened as the ridge came back to Western Canada. This is some satellite information today. And once again, you can see in British Columbia and Alberta just tremendous amount of wildfire smoke. So this is now the second round in this part of Canada this spring with very large wildfires. And if we look at the animation of where that smoke is expected to go throughout the day on Monday, we notice that most of it's going to be spreading throughout the Canadian prairie. This is the smoke that was from the fires that were in Quebec getting pulled into a low that's moving off of the Canadian Maritimes. And overall, the air quality here in the southeast is not largely going to be affected by this, but I need you to know there are still large wildfires going all around us. Now, I want to go out a step farther with this, and then I'll reel it back into a near-term forecast, and then we'll look out over the next couple of weeks. But this is July, August, and September. Every long-range model that's been made available so far in this new month has shown the same thing. You're looking at precipitation patterns, greens being wetter than normal, the browns being drier. And there is some concern that the large ridge that's been here is going to set up a little bit farther to the south and a little bit farther to the east. Rather than sitting here, it might be displaced where I just kind of drew the circulation. And that would mean we'd be pulling quite a bit of flow across the main development region over the Lesser Antilles, the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, and we're going to have to just start to concern ourselves a bit more with what this could do to the upcoming hurricane season. Because when there's an El Nino, which of course we have right now, the evolution of the El Nino tends to produce weakened trade winds here. Okay, so the trade winds tend to be kind of reversed at even times, and there tends to be a lot of rising motion in this area. So they tend to kind of do something like this. And what that tends to do is increase the wind shear in this area. And that oftentimes tends to shut down tropical systems. But right now, the ocean temperatures, when you look at the average, these are anomalies, but if you look at the average inside this area, they already match the peak ocean temperatures we typically get in September and October. So this is where this major concern comes in about what the longer range hurricane forecast looks like. Now you might be going, well, wait a minute, it shows up dry right in through here. And I'm going to tell you, right now, looking out as far as July into August and September does not seem like a worthwhile venture in terms of trying to come up with some sort of skill or accuracy in doing so. And even though I told you that when there's an El Nino, we worry about it being dry here, this is one of those years where I think there are too many moving pieces, specifically in the Atlantic Ocean, to make any sort of conclusive long-range forecast. What has been a consistent signal, though, is this, but that's way off in the main development region. So we've got a lot to be watching for here as we go forward. Now, on the temperature side of it, the depth of that trough that's been off the southeast coast has largely led to a deficit in GDDs. So this map shows you from April 1st up until Friday. There's always a 2-day lag on this. And remember, I record on Sunday nights. That we're off anywhere between maybe 100 to 130 GDDs compared to normal throughout the Carolinas. When you get down into Georgia, those numbers are off, closer to 30 to 60 GDDs. While the Midwest, the Mississippi and Missouri valleys, getting up into the Red River Valley of the North, we have some places here that are major into surplus of GDDs, primarily due to just a lot of heat. The majority of the Cotton Belt has been cooler than average, especially as you go across Texas all the way over to California. And it's the fact that this is kind of flipped, right? The warmth is north, the cool is south, that we just have had such terrible flow across the country. So to keep kind of up with these statistics, I'm going to show you the next graphic, which goes from May 10th through June 11th. Now this one shows you total precipitation ranks by climate district. The Great Lakes Basin, the Mississippi Basin, the Ohio River Basin getting into New England. So this whole area through here has been extremely dry. And only places that saw good moisture in April and early May, before the 10th, that's when this pattern got established, okay, have been able to kind of endure this drought. Now, yes, there was rain through this area this weekend, and we're expecting more to begin the week. But this is not going to be enough rain to kind of ease these drought worries. And many places were missed. I'll show you that in just a few moments here. Throughout North Carolina, if you just notice, as the farther south you go, the better the precipitation ranks have been. And in North Carolina, my observations have been that we've had enough precipitation that we're not seeing large-scale drought issues developing here. There are dry spots when you look across the state, but I'm looking at the overall regional health. And it really was great that about 2 weeks ago, that low just sat there and dumped a lot of rain over this area. Because we've not had high evaporation rates, because it's not been hot, we have yet to see the detrimental effects of being drier like this. Now, while I'm saying that, I'm remembering that throughout the high plains and the western plains of the United States, some of these areas have had so much rainfall, incredible amount of flooding, and it's been devastating to agriculture, even though it's pulled this area out of long-standing drought. It's also important to note that up here in coastal Pacific Northwest, here in Washington and Oregon, it has been exceptionally dry as well. But that's why the drought monitor looks like this. We've seen drought improve in this area. We've seen it gain a foothold in this region. But overall, from the Carolinas down to Georgia and to Florida, we aren't exactly looking at widespread drought issues across where we grow a lot of crops in this area. So that's the backdrop I just wanted to establish before we kind of dig into where this is going. Because on Sunday, I was watching radar imagery, not only in my home state of Illinois, which this is the first meaningful rainfall for some folks here in over a month, but the complexes of storms that move through the Mid-South, and this was up till about, 11 o'clock in the evening here on Monday, East Coast time, Sunday, East Coast time. This is where those storms had made it through. They're coming over the Appalachian Mountains early in the morning here. And also earlier in the day on Sunday, the complex of storms that ripped through parts of South Carolina, doing quite a bit of damage in certain places. I'll show you that in just a few seconds. So you have a front that's on its way, should be there on Monday, and you'll get a good look at that here in just a second. But let's get an update on this. There it is. This is 11 p.m. East Coast time, 10 p.m. Central. This was the weekend rainfall. Now, specifically for the corn and soybean growers, we're going to have to watch to see if over the next, 24 to 36 hours, this area begins to fill in as the low continues to wrap up here. But there will be some vital acres that are going to be tucked into this region, again, corn and soybean growers, that are going to be missed by this particular setup. So I'll show you that again in a second. But here are the storm reports from Sunday. And again, we had a lot of severe wind damage that came through parts of Georgia and South Carolina. And the complex of storms I just showed you here on Sunday night rolling through this part of the Mid-South toward the Appalachian Mountains had a history of producing some large hail and also some strong winds. But as we look at it, as we go out to the 12th here, Monday, there is just a marginal risk of severe weather kind of stretching along the East Coast. The highest risk areas are down here across the south back into Texas. Behind this cold front, there is some colder air. Take a look at this temperature difference. So we've already seen the temperatures drop off in some places up 20 degrees, and this front has got some kick to it. I want to show you what it's going to do on radar here. So let's begin this. Here we go. 7 a.m. Central Time, 8 a.m. East Coast Time on Monday. So there's the boundary. That's the front coming right over the top of the mountains, getting down, through central North and South Carolina into Georgia. We're going to watch out the southern edge of this, I think, for the strongest storms. We play through the day on Monday. This is now by midday Monday, and we're going to have another chance in the afternoon of some scattered showers and storms here as we work toward evening. But take a look at the size of this low. As that low curls up over Michigan, it's going to deliver more light rain into Wisconsin, northern Illinois, northern Indiana, three places that desperately need more moisture. While we're going to tend to be drier as we work our way into Tuesday, cooler but drier, we're going to keep an eye again on where this low potentially drops rain throughout the Great Lakes Basin. You say, why are we focused here? Well, that is the area that's been the driest. You need to keep an eye on this because this is controlling some of our kind of major commodities as they're being traded right now, primarily on weather changes. Once we get into the day on Tuesday, we will see complexes of storms Tuesday afternoon coming over the Appalachian Mountains down into Georgia as well. Some of these storms could likely be pretty strong. They're going to be on the southern side of this, but we're going to watch a frontal boundary get stalled out right in this area. And that's going to be the focal point for having quite a bit of inclement weather as we go through the rest of this week. But you're going to go north of that line and things are going to be drier. So keep an eye right in through here. This is the setup. We've got a deep trough that's going to spend the beginning of the week sitting here. This is the subtropical jet coming over the top of this ridge. And the Bermuda High, it's not even really anywhere to be found. You could still say there's high pressure here. There's some high pressure that kind of stretches in this area, but no normal Bermuda High in place right in this region. Now, do you notice there is no massive ridge in the mid part of the country? That has since maneuvered itself way over here. There's some shifting going around in this overall pattern, and it's finally something different from what we've seen for the last few months. So let's take a look at what this means for us. Most of this story for the rest of this forecast is going to be captured by the change in the height pattern. So what I'm talking about here is this is where there's ridges or higher heights due to heat, and this is where there are troughs, lower heights in the atmosphere due to colder weather. So the atmosphere compresses or expands based upon temperature. Okay, so here we go. As we play this forward through Tuesday into Wednesday. I mean, that trough just moved basically from here to New England. Very slow mover. We stay in the cooler weather on the southern side of this all week long. Now, once we get out there toward Friday into Saturday, the key factor in this pattern is the pressing south of this trough, how it's going to interact with this one, and the ridge that forms here. Because these three pieces, as they start to work together, are going to change up what happens across the eastern half of the country. And as we go past the 18th into the 19th, look at that trough dive down there. And we go out here to the 20th, 21st. So there's the solstice. If the pattern does, in fact, go into something like this, this is going to end up setting up a large ridge in this area, and lots of storms are going to come in like this initially. They're going to roll off the top of the ridge like this, and a lot of times they tend to build into the southeast. This means, though, that the probability of us breaking away to very hot temperatures here is pretty limited as we move toward the solstice, which means the cooler weather we've been experiencing will likely continue as we go forward. So that just takes us out there 10 days. Even if we go farther than this, a key thing is beginning to show up in the models, and that is the flow is wanting to back itself up a bit and do something a bit more like this. And that setup is actually a wetter one for a lot of the southeast. It's a stormy one for the Midwest. It's a hot one for Texas. It's a cool pattern for California. So let's go look at it. The next 7 days, this is total accumulated precipitation. Like I said, in the meantime, a stalled out boundary here. So the potential for a lot of storms, especially as you get into parts of Georgia. As we mentioned, the farther north you go, the drier the risk is going to be. Now, to show you some probability maps, this is the chance over the next 10 days of getting at least an inch. If we step this up to 2 inches, you're going to see that corridor being the wettest. Going into northern South Carolina and the rest of North Carolina, these probabilities are lower. I would like to show you what the models are suggesting here. And you probably notice I'm not showing you any maps that give you kind of exact numbers on precipitation. There's no model that's got anywhere close to an idea on how much there's going to be. I apologize, but it's the problem we're in right now. It's the summer thunderstorm regime. And as a result, we can't do that. The models can't predict it. That's why we look at these probability maps to give us an idea on those wettest corridors versus where it could be drier. So for most of the next week, we're wetter, Georgia, and drier as the farther you move north, okay? But not dry, just drier, okay? So let's go ahead and have a look. Let's go ahead and have a look at our model comparison here. GFS on the left, European on the right. Let's start this off here early Monday morning. So there's the frontal boundary sweeping through. It comes through. That's midday Monday into Monday evening. That's the isolated storms I talked about. You then get out there to Tuesday. This is midday Tuesday into Tuesday evening. There's the complex of storms moving through Georgia. The models have a little bit different position on it, but they are moving through. There's the low still curling itself up, over Lake Michigan. And then do you see right in through here, there's this boundary. I know it doesn't look like much in the models, but it's there. And that's where the storms are going to be. So see how they keep firing right in the same area in the European model? I know the GFS doesn't show it as well, but they're there, okay? It will be in this area throughout the middle and end of this week. And we get out there toward Friday, that's when that front could finally slide out enough. But behind it, there's probably going to be another system on Saturday and Sunday sweeping through the Midwest. Look over here at the European, okay? That could just drive another chance for storms as we go into next weekend. So that kind of plays you out at least a week in this pattern. The week 2 outlook, all 3 models show above for North Carolina. And even though the GFS is wetter the closer you get to the Gulf Coast, drier. The likelihood of that dryness getting into Georgia, I think, is lower. I think most of the dryness will be confined to the southern plains, kind of like the solution that's given to you by the CPC and the ECMWF. Okay, next, let's talk about the tropics because there has been a bit of a baffling thing going on in the tropics. This is an animation. Every single flash you see of it is for the same time, the 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, June 24th. And you notice, just watch as it flashes, there seems to keep being these big tropical systems that keep showing up in the forecast. We've been watching the GFS model now for like 4 or 5 days, continuing to kind of spin up something in the Caribbean. Now that's getting dizzy, so I'm going to go here. I just want to mention that we need to keep an eye in these 2 areas for some potential tropical development. Do we have any indication over the next 10 days that something's going to pop out and, do anything like this? No. I mean, other than the fact that the models are toying with some ideas, I just need you to know that we're going to watch this part of the Caribbean very carefully. Okay, that's it. Keep an eye on this. Just to prove this to you, though, the National Hurricane Center, let's go to that site. They've currently got nothing on their 7-day outlook. So we're still just kind of in model, we often jokingly call it la la land, but I want you to be aware of some stuff that I'm watching here. Next, let's go talk about some temperatures, because I mentioned we're not going to really break away to much heat. Monday's high temperatures are shown here. We can go into Tuesday, Wednesday. We just keep slightly cooler than average conditions. I mean, it's beautiful. The temperatures are amazing, but we don't break away into much heat. Where's the heat? It's under the ridge in Texas. You go out there to Thursday, same thing. Friday, that's when we finally return toward normal. But getting into the weekend, remember, there's another chance for rain. That's why we see these values kind of dropping back off again. Bigger picture, this is a 15-day forecast, but it's a 5-day sliding window of averages. So let me take you out there today, 5 through 10. We are watching, remember, the flow do something a bit like this. So that ridge is beginning to develop back in this area. So heat is starting to return to this section of the country, but not necessarily for the southeast. We then keep playing out there all the way until, take it out there to June 26th. And again, that flow pattern doing something like this is what we got to watch. Big time pattern change. Very important to keep an eye on going forward. Now let's go ahead and look and try to examine the long range forecast. But I want to let you know my confidence right now and where this pattern is going is low. And you need a quick reminder as to why, I don't know where this is going to be exactly, the Bermuda high. So here we go. Here. This is the newest updates from the CPC. So that's their 6 to 10-day outlook. We've discussed that. This is their 8 to 14-day outlook. We've discussed this. Their newest is this. This is the longer range outlook for the last week of June, the first week of July. And overall, when you look at the pattern, we do not see the models forecasting much in the way of heat compared to normal. And there's likely going to be a wet corridor that stretches right into this area, with the driest being in the upper Midwest. From here, let's compare it to a couple different models. This would be the CFS V2. Again, do you notice that in terms of precip, it's not really picking up on strong dry signals? That would be the 25th through July 1st, and even out there the 2nd through the 8th. Again, we're not seeing that, which means there are no indications as of today, June 11th, when I'm recording this, that I could be telling you that there's drought problems that are going to be, showing up. Even though, as we mentioned earlier, we're worried about it because of El Nino. It's not yet, though. And then I can show you the new long-range update from the European model on precipitation. It has actually been a bit off as of late. I guess that's the best way to say it. But it continues to want to put this area over drier and keeps much of the southeast back to the mid-south with storms and wet. So that is the latest guidance I've got from our mid-range models that go out there, a few weeks. In fact, this map we're looking at here goes from the time period of June 20th to July 20th, the first full month of summer. So we're going to watch this carefully as things go forward. If we do stay cooler and wetter, we need to be thinking hard about what that could mean towards certain disease pressures. So please keep that in the back of your mind as we go forward with this forecast. I'm going to stop it there. I really appreciate you giving me a lot of extra time in this forecast video, but a lot of things in movement, a lot of things in flux, and so we got to stay on top of it. I appreciate you. Thanks.